In this lecture, we're going to take a look at some of the methods we can use in the string class. Before we talk about some of the different string class methods that we have, let's just review a couple of terms that will help us with some of these methods. So remember that a string is simply a sequence of 0 or more characters. The index is the position number of our string. So here, the index of our first character is always going to be 0 and not 1. And likewise, if we have n characters in our string, the index of the last position is going to be n minus 1. But the index kind of lets us know the position number of a specific character. And then finally, the length of a string is the number of characters that's in the string. Before we go over any specific string method, we need to mention that we're going to be using a specific example for all these methods. So we're going to use the string TSM with storing the actual string team solo mid. Now, if you've ever played League of Legends, you get the reference. If not, then we're just using this for an example for all of our string methods. So the first one we're going to take a look at is called the char@at method. And we've already talked a little bit about this when inputting characters. But we take a single parameter, which is our index, and then we're going to return a character. So what this method does is we just simply return the character at the position specified by our index. So let me give you an example. So let's say I have tsm.char@3. This means get me the character at index 3. So if we look at our string here, we have 0, 1, 2, 3 would be the letter M. This is at position 3, because remember with strings, 0 is the first position. So our char@at method would return the character M. The next method we're going to take a look at is called index of. And it's pretty much going to do the exact opposite of what char@at does. We're going to take in a character as a parameter, and we're going to return an integer. So what this method does is we return the index of the first occurrence of a specific character. So we look through there, if we have some specific character, the first time we find it, we're going to return whatever that index is. Now, if this character does not exist in our string, it's going to return a -1. So that lets us know that the character is just not in the string. So let's take a look at an example. So if I do tsm.index of and pass the letter O as a parameter, I'm going to search through team solo mid until I find the first O. And in fact, there are two different O's, but remember we want just the first one, and it's going to return a 5, which is the index of the first time we encounter that letter in our string. The next method we'll take a look at is called concat. So we're going to take in a string, and it's going to return another string. All this method does is we return a string such that str, which is our parameter here, is concatenated at the end of our current string. Remember, since this is a string method, we invoke this on an object of the string class. So we take our string object and we tack on the contents of str at the end of it. So let's take a look at an example. So if I have tsm.concat, and then what I put inside there is the string 1 with a space in front of it. Now remember, tsm was just the string team solo mid, and then I'm going to tack on space 1. So the output of this string, or what it returns, is going to be team solo mid space 1. We'll now take a look at the compareto method. So this method simply compares two strings, one character at a time. And it's going to return an integer value. And depending on what that value is, tells us the result of our comparison. So it's going to return one of three things. So if it returns a negative number, and we're not going to worry about exactly what that negative number is, all we care about is just that it is a negative number. So if it returns that, then that means that our string object is less than str alphabetically. What does that mean? It means that our string object comes before whatever string is in str in alphabetical order. Now, if we return a positive number, then that means that our string is greater than str alphabetically, or it comes after str in an alphabetical order. If we return a 0, then that means our current string is the exact same string as str. So let me give you an example. So let's say I have tsm.compareto cloud9. this is going to return a positive number because team solo mid, the string, comes after cloud9 alphabetically because capital C comes before capital T alphabetically. Therefore, the string cloud9 comes before the string team solo mid, so therefore team solo mid is greater than cloud9. We'll now take a look at the equals method. So what this simply does is it returns true if the string is the same as what we have in our parameter, or an str. So this is very similar to our Compareto method, except it just returns whether or not the string is equal. So it returns true if they are the same, returns false if they're different. So if we use our example, if we do tsm.equals cloud9, this is going to return false because the two strings are different. TSM is a completely different string from cloud9.